Well, welcome back to the program. It is June, and in the month of June, we are talking about being steadfast. As you all know who have been joining us, we are basing the entire year on 2 Peter chapter 1. And last week we had the Ramseys on talking about the ministry of 1330. And man, I have had a front row seat to what it looks like to be steadfast in that college ministry. One of the things they shared about was the process of going through remodeling a building and how that grew some steadfastness in us and perseverance. And I think our guest today is going to have some things along those same lines. But you are going to love hearing from my longtime friend, Valerie Gooch. One of the things that every time I'm with you, Valerie, I think I wish I had more time with you. But I love just the heart connection that we get to have because of our love for the Lord, but also our passion to love and serve people. So you are not going to want to miss hearing about Valerie and the journey that the Lord's had her on and the incredible work that she is doing. So Val, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for asking. I'm excited.
Man, I cannot wait for you to share the story of the PARC and how the Lord birthed that in you. But I want to start with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and your family and just your relationship with the Lord.
Okay. I love the Lord. I just do. I'm very grateful. When I was 15, I was in the church and always loved church and God. But when I was 15, I remember specifically the verse I read, and it was, Philippians 4:6, but it was in the Living Bible. It says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God your needs and don't forget to thank him. And I was 15. And so I took him at his word and I began to do that. And I began my journey with praying about everything and listening to the Lord. And, it wasn't perfect and I made a lot of mistakes, but I quickly came back to him. And in that journey, I feel like I was isolated from a lot of things because he helped me through a lot of things. And so I often say I was raised in a bubble. I had amazing parents and we were raised in church, but I also had that covering as I walked out my teenage years and throughout my life. And I have been in a bubble for many years. And so for me to work in the ministry that I work in, I often feel unqualified, but yet very honored.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did the Lord birth your heart to do what you're doing?
Well, it's fascinating because I was a children's pastor for 25 years. And so when I wasn't doing that anymore, I spent a year trying to find myself. I had found myself in my job, which so often we do. And as I began that journey, I realized that what I cared most about wasn't necessarily children. I cared about people. And I always believed passionately that God went to way too much trouble to create us. I mean, you of all people understand the magnificence and miraculousness of a baby and the creation of that he went to way too much trouble for any of us to be mediocre.
That's right.
He plans on each of us to be amazing. And so I felt like if each person can find their identity in the Lord and hear him through his word and hear him through prayer, there is an amazingness inside of each person to be all that God created him to be. And I used to, I used to have a passion for that with children and then with the volunteers. And then when I realized it was for people, that's when my passion began to birth for those that are homeless.
Yeah. Well, I remember 2 phone calls that I've had with you. The first one you may not remember, but you were the children's pastor for my children. And my son was 3. And he started asking me what it meant to be saved.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
It all came from a person we knew had passed away. And it was an older person. And he said, my 3-year-old, well, that's okay because he went to heaven. And I said, well, he didn't go to heaven because he was old. Why do we go to heaven? Well, we go to heaven if we ask Jesus in our heart. Well, it started him like, Mom, I need to ask Jesus in my heart. And he was 3.
Yeah.
And I remember calling you and saying, can the 3-year-old pray to receive Jesus? And you said, of course they can. Why would you ever discourage him from wherever his heart is to pursue the Lord. He may pray it again at a later time, but why would we not let him pray it now? And I was like, amen to that. And it was just such wisdom. But the other call that stands out to me was when you called me to tell me your vision for the park. And I want to hear about what does the park do? What does even the name, the park, mean? And how has the Lord taken you from the beginning to now? Because we're talking about being steadfast. And the definition of that is the quality of being resolute, dutifully firm, and unwavering. And I know that just from my vantage point, I have watched you be steadfast in your pursuit of this mission. So tell us about the park.
Well, the PARC stands for Panhandle Adult Rebuilding Center. And our passion is for people, that those that are homeless be seen and recognized, and that we felt that it was important that they be called by their name, and also that their relationship is key in them being seen as people, but also seeing themselves.
Right.
And so we began this ministry with a passion and a hope that those who are homeless could be seen and not be seen as a homeless person, but a person who is homeless.
That's right.
And so as a friend and I started it together, and we were very, very different. He had lived a very different lifestyle. He actually was in a rehab program when we met. And I had not lived in the way that he had lived. And so we spent a lot of our first years in friendship being kind of amazed at how the other one behaved. He said he'd never met anybody like me, and I was like, I never would have hung out with anybody like you.
Both learning from one another, yes.
And so it taught us to see the people rather than what they were doing. And that was just always my heart and my passion. And so we saw a need. We had worked at a place that served those who were homeless. And so what we saw was that they really longed for relationship. We worked in the donation area, and that was my favorite time of the day, to go in and help them find what they needed and to get to meet them. But we saw that they longed for us to visit with them, and we actually saw them change. I saw their countenance change and their faces change as we began to just call them by name and just visit with them for a few minutes. And so that's kind of where it started, and just seeing that they didn't have anything to do during the day to be productive, and to, they would just sit on the bridge, or they, just wander around. And so we knew there was a need.
Right.
But as we began to think about it and dream about it, so to speak, we came up with this idea, and it's very bizarre and random. It's unlike anything we could find. We wanted to fill a gap, and so there are so many agencies that do wonderful things. We didn't need to duplicate those,
right?
And so we are a place that fills a gap in that we provide a place for them to come, to be known, to have conversation, to be seen, but also to be productive. And those two things, the relationship and being productive, are key in helping them remember that they are valuable, and remember that there are things in them that make possibilities. And so it was like I said, there's nothing we could find like it. And so we just kind of we Googled business plan.
and you made one.
Yes. And then we made a business plan and sort of lined out what we were hoping. And then we, went to some Christian businessmen, and they gave us some good guidance, changed our business plan 8 times. And, but in that journey, began to articulate and to define what we wanted to do. And it was interesting because it doesn't make any sense. It's very, very hard to explain. But God put people in our path that got it, that it was on their hearts too. And so they began to walk with us. And when, it's a story of miracles. When we started with $150 and we were washing windows. Yeah. And then when we bought our building, we had $1,200 in the bank. It was a huge step of faith. We had to pay $1,000, and we talked a long time. Felt very stupid. Yeah. But we said, if God gives us enough to do the next step, then we will do it. And that was kind of how our journey began. If He gives us enough to do the next step, then we'll keep going.
Right.
And so that's been our journey, one by one, step by step.
Yeah. What year did this start?
That was 2014.
2014. Yeah. So this is your 10-year anniversary.
Yes.
I love that.
I know. We're pretty excited.
Well, as you're talking about relationship and having conversation with people and seeing people, our passage in Peter, we're talking about that the Lord has made precious and great promises to each of us. And that you pointed this out, we get to partake in his divine nature. Mm-hmm. And then there's a listing of all of these different virtues or muscle groups, right? We need to have faith. And then we need to have goodness and knowledge and self-control, steadfastness. But what this passage says is that if these qualities in us are ever increasing, they will keep us from being ineffective and unfruitful. But then it goes on to say, for whoever lacks these qualities is so nearsighted that he is blind. And I know in our ministry, I think people, Christian people, godly people, awesome, wonderful people, stereotype women or homeless people. Right. And they think, well, these women, they just think that it's an eraser and an easy thing to have an abortion. And when they get in a bad situation, they use abortion like birth control and they just run off and have an abortion. Well, I've not met those women.
Right.
Because when you sit down with a real life pregnant woman, she's overwhelmed, she's afraid, she doesn't know what to do, and she is looking for a way out of a very, very difficult situation. And it's heartbreaking. But in relation with her and listening to her and seeing her and not being blind,
right,
we are able to help her with whatever circumstance it is that makes her feel like she has to choose abortion. I believe the same is true for you. When we drive down the street and we see someone at the corner holding up a sign or walking down the street with some kind of a buggy, we have a stereotype or a thought of a homeless person.
Right.
But when they come into the park, it's not that. And you get to interact with them and see them as people.
Yeah. And it is amazing. I have met the most wonderful people, and I never would have known them if it wasn't for the park.
Yeah.
And there are many things I love about the park. I could go on, but there's just a spirit of acceptance there. That's one of our core values, that we will take them where they are and help them go to their next. Mm-hmm. We don't have a program. We don't have things that they have to follow or steps they have to take. That's a lot of the beauty of the park, is they get to come in and be who they are. Mm-hmm. And in that, start to move forward to whatever their next might be. And it's different for everyone. And that's really wonderful, because it takes a lot of pressure off of us. We don't have to be the answer. We are not the answer.
Right.
And so we don't have to try to fix it or come up, with how to, we are just there to accept them. Yeah. And it is amazing the power that comes in that acceptance and in that giving people attention and getting to see them and know them. And we can watch them change.
Yeah.
As we see people that are homeless on the streets, when they come into the park, they begin to act differently. Mm. And we begin to see the person of who they really are, right, and who they were more intended to be. And it's just a wonderful revelation, so to speak, to watch them begin to open up. And you watch, when you're sleeping outside, it's chaotic and it's scary and it's dangerous. And so they have a lot of walls, and they also have a persona that they have to present.
Right.
And so when they come into the park and begin to learn that it's safe and they're accepted and they're not judged, to get to see them,
yeah,
and to get to know them is probably one of the greatest honors of my life.
Absolutely. Well, it reminds me of when I was a teenager. I was raised in an awesome home, mm-hmm, like you, really in a bubble. But I went through a season of just very much rebellion, outright sinful lifestyle. And I've heard this described, and I may mess this up, but when I was at my lowest point, I did not need to be convinced or convicted of how bad I was. but I needed to be convinced and reminded that I was a child of God.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we can find ourselves in such a situation. Society, and maybe even sometimes the Christian community would think, I've got to convince you that you are in a very bad place.
And you need to repent.
And you need to repent, and you need to do all of these checklists of things.
Yes.
But what you're saying is, nope, we see value in you because you are a child of God. And we love you, and we accept you, and we're here.
Right.
And that's really it.
It's amazing that really is it. But I have seen the power of it over and over and over. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I have a question here, and I want you to think about this. How has the Lord developed perseverance or steadfastness in your life? And can you give us an example of when you had to remain steadfast and wait and watch for God to come through?
It's interesting because he's been developing that my whole life. And it's just funny that this has come to my mind. But the thing that comes to my mind is when I was a children's pastor and I was trying to start a preteen ministry. And I wanted the 5th graders to separate from the elementary and the 6th graders to come down from the middle school ministry and form a preteen. And that was, nobody would listen to me. They thought it was the stupidest idea. It was crazy. And I remember trying to convince people and I believe that's a very prime time for our children, for our preteens. And if we can teach them to hear God and teach them to love the Bible and find themselves in that, they've conquered so many of the things that they're about to encounter. And so I was very passionate about it, but I didn't feel like anybody would listen to me. They just thought it was a crazy idea. And so I remember one day, one of the people that was over all that came in and said, yeah, we've talked about it and they're going to let the 6th graders come down. I mean, it was just, I don't even know how I was like, what, how did that even happen? And it was, I was steadfast in that I tried to continue to put the vision before them, but I can be pushy. And I felt like, other people might have felt like I was being pushy. I didn't feel like I was being pushy, but I felt like I'd kind of just stepped back and given it up. And then all of a sudden the Lord just came through. And it was very hard. We started with like 13 people and nobody would help me, but I just believed in it. And so as I began to start moving forward and people began to catch the vision over a few years, I watched it blossom. But I think, it definitely helped me to be steadfast because I just believed in that ministry and that age so very much. Yeah. And so then, as we step into the park with something again that doesn't make sense, but just seeing the value in it. And it's like you can't, of course I saw a bigger picture, but you can't do that all at once. I have to just take one person at a time. And if I find somebody that actually understands and believes in it, then try to keep moving forward, until believing I'm a visionary. Yeah. And I believe that it will come to pass. And just step at a time, I guess. Yeah.
I love the definition of to be steadfast or to persevere, unwavering and resolute. And I don't think everyone is that. And sometimes even the word perseverance, I don't even like the sound of the word perseverance because that's a word. You don't persevere through good times. Yeah, you true. Persevere through struggle. You remain unwavering. Right. Sometimes when you're the only one. Yes. And that can be a hard place. But I think people who learn to develop perseverance, and I also think it's interesting that in this chain of virtues, it says, for this reason, make every effort to supplement. So there is an order to this. Faith with goodness, goodness with knowledge, knowledge with self-control, self-control with steadfastness. And I think that one of the reasons that we need self-control before we have to persevere is because we learn in self-control, this isn't about what I can accomplish, right? And it only is going to come through if God, you do it. And my job is to stand. Right. Unwaveringly, to stand and to continue to remind the people of these things. And that is what you have done. In this passage, it talks about if these qualities are ever increasing in us, then we will not be ineffective or unproductive. So how do you think that having perseverance or being steadfast helps us to be effective in sharing the gospel?
It helps us to know God better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's in those times, like you said, to persevere and be steadfast. Those are not the easy times.
Mm-mm.
And so as we have to seek the Lord. I mean, we have to push through and we have to hear him again and again and again. And through those times when we hear his voice and read his word, we know him.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know this, Candy, we can't do this without that.
No.
And so I think the more that I have had to be steadfast, the more that I've been misunderstood, the more that where I'm going doesn't make sense, or there's no way we can pay the bills this month. There's no way, I just get to know God. And as I know him more and more, I realize how big he is.
Yeah.
I realize how much he loves me, but he loves the people that we are ministering to, the people that we love, he loves even more.
Right.
And he wants these things for them. And so he begins, we know that he will fight for us.
Yeah.
And we know that he doesn't always fight like we would like him to,
Mm-hmm.
but we know him.
That's right.
And so I think that if we're going to remain steadfast and we're going to persevere, we have to know him. And that's, always a journey. That's constantly pushing in, constantly. I mean, we have conversations. I try to be respectful, but I do talk back to him sometimes. Like, are you crazy?
Yes.
What are you doing?
Right.
And he's always very kind.
Yeah.
I think that has to be the key.
There's definitely over the course of, you've been in ministry how many years? Decades.
35, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm coming up on 30 years. And there's been times where you just feel like that. I don't understand this. Why are we experiencing this? I feel like I'm misrepresented, all the things. And so many times the Lord has just sweetly said, there are things that I cannot teach you, but that you experience difficulty. And I think about my own life and how many times we are in a position where you are asking God for a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the only people that see miracles are people that have the steadfastness to stand in a situation that requires one.
Yeah, miracles require a hard situation.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of, anyway, I'm sorry.
But it's true.
Believe that. If you want a miracle, you have to be in a situation that's really difficult and impossible. And those are not fun.
Mm-mm.
And then when you get it, then you have to steward it. And it's a lot of work and all of the things. And I love miracles and I love God's blessing, but it's not all roses and
there was the moment before the miracle. Yes.
Uh-huh.
It's true. And I am asking the Lord, even as I pray through these things, would you make me so close to knowing you and hearing your voice that when I am in that moment that requires a miracle, that rather than complain or become downcast and question you, could I see it as an opportunity that, okay, I know you're about to show up. And I wish that I always responded that way. I currently don't. Yeah. Sometimes, but a lot of the times I know the Lord is like, look, we have been here. Right. Can you just trust me?
Relax.
You relax, just like the scripture that you started us with.
Well, and that's my prayer, is that God would give me faith and peace and rest. Because I want to act that way in those situations. I want to be that way on the inside. And this is kind of funny. I had a conversation with the Lord the other day and I was like, Lord, help me believe, help me to have faith. And he was like, Valerie, you've got faith.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if I had faith, why would I be stressed? And he said, well, this is a little bit of a stressful situation.
Right.
And I thought, oh,
Okay.
I do have faith, and so, but I do want to get to that place where I can, like Peter when he walked on the water, that I can walk on that water and not get nervous.
Yes.
Because he does keep coming through.
He does.
And so, yeah, I totally hear what you're saying.
Yeah. But anyone standing on water, the thought is going to come to you like, what in the world? Yeah. Yeah. I love the thought too of self-control being a part of being steadfast. The best example that I can give, we all are either fight or flight.
Yeah.
And mine is almost always fight.
Yes.
But it is move as fast as you possibly can.
Exactly.
If I am unsure, unsteady, a little
move
anxious, I'm going to move really, really fast.
Me too.
And sometimes that's not right. Sometimes the Lord is like, can you have some self-control? Yeah. And let me
fight for you.
Fight for you. That's right. That's a hard one for me. Yeah. I'd rather just run into the brick wall.
Me too.
Well, I want you to bring us up to speed on where you are now with the park, because thinking about you starting with $150 and 10 years now has passed. Tell us what's happening now.
Well, when we first started, there were many, many months that we were not going to be able to pay our bills. And we would look at our bills. We would look at, things we could cut. And every single month we got a check that provided for us. And that happened for like 2 or 3 years. And that's pretty terrible.
It's scary.
God came through over and over and over. And to this day, we have never been in the red. And that's very miraculous to me to think about, first of all, when we started, nobody knew who we were. Nobody knew what we did. And God has continued to provide for us. And so, when we bought our building, it was a strip club and a swingers club. It's a little bitty stucco building on 6th Street. And we redeemed it. And so in this time, we've been able to pay off our building. We've also been able to purchase the property behind us. We've been able to purchase the 2 lots beside us. And it's a pretty big territory that God has given us, and we're debt free. And so in that, we also were able to raise the money to build a new building. Yeah. And that I don't know. I don't know how that happened. I still don't understand how God has done what he's done. And I give him all the credit because, when we first started, and I continue, I don't know what I'm doing. I was a children's pastor. And so he has, just believing him. And like you say, being steadfast and staying on course. Yeah. That's huge.
That's right.
And God continues to do it over and over and over. And so we've just found out when we started raising the money a couple of years ago, we had a bid. Well, now 2 years later, it's gone quite a bit up.
Yeah.
It's gone up a lot.
Right.
And so now we have more money to raise. And I think for the first time since the park started, I believe that we're going to.
Yeah, I love it.
It doesn't feel as impossible as it has all these other years before it. I hope that I continue to walk that way in the peace and faith. But he has done it over and over and over. And he has shown his love for the people in the park. And I believe that he loves us very much. And so I'm excited to see how it happens. Our attendance has we've grown a lot, and we have a lot of people coming every day. We have our staff has grown, which amazes me every time. I bet you feel this way when payroll comes through. You're like, oh my goodness. But we have a wonderful staff that God has put together. And it's what I love the most is, getting to watch the people change. We get to watch them from the minute when they come in, we can actually watch them change within a day of being seen and being shown respect and not being judged and those things. But like just this week, I had a young man come by and we started talking. It's been 5 years since he's been to the park. And he introduced me to his wife, and he's working full time. And they have a home, and they're about to move to a bigger home. Oh. And he was sharing pictures with me of their property and how excited they are. And he said, I haven't been homeless since I left the park. Oh. And he's telling me it was 5 years ago.
Wow.
And, I can tell you story after story of when they come back. And I said, so, James, why'd you come back? And he said, I wanted you to see I'm doing good. Oh. I just want you to see. And we have a lot of stories like that.
Yeah.
And they're priceless.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that is the heart of what's happening there. I want you to tell us if there's someone watching and they feel like they want to somehow be a part of the park,
Mhm.
how would they do that?
Well, we have a website,
Okay.
which is the PARC, PARC.net, and you can go on and find a lot about us off of that. But I think the best way is to come and see.
Yeah.
We are very unique. And most people have a paradigm, like you said. But when you walk into the park, we hear so many people go, oh, it's not what people expect.
Right.
It's another thing I was starting to say earlier is when you come to the park and become involved and become a part of it, we all change too.
Yeah.
We've seen our volunteers change exponentially. We've seen our community change. Anybody that comes finds that, I'm sure you find this in your ministry as well.
Yeah.
They're changed.
Yeah.
And I love that about God.
Right.
And so I would encourage, you can call us. That number's on our website as well. Or you can drop by. A lot of people think that's crazy, but we're so fluid and our people are in and out all day long, of course. Our volunteers and everybody's in and out. So you can drop by anytime. Please feel free. One of our staff members or volunteers would be happy to show you what to do. And then we can also show you how to get involved.
Yeah.
Of course, we if you want to donate, because we're open during the time a lot of people work.
Yes.
We have an Amazon wish list,
Okay.
which we always appreciate people sending. And you're also free to donate always.
Yes.
Of course, we're in this building right now and we need to raise some money. And so, we always
Yes.
do. So
Yes.
just those kinds of things is the best way. But I really love to encourage people to come by.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to go by and walk through the facility and be around the volunteers, the staff, and the people that are there. And I know that some of you who are watching, you're thinking things like, I could never work with homeless people, or I could never work with pregnant girls who are considering abortion. But that's good news, because you don't have to work with homeless people or people considering abortion. You just have to love people.
Right.
And when you come to the park, what you realize is this isn't homeless people. These are people that may have different struggles than I have, but they have the same needs, the same heart, the same values. They love their family, and they need community. And if you have a calling or a desire to just love people, to not be nearsighted or blind, to see people the way that God sees them, but also to pursue these precious and great promises that God's made to us and to live in a divine way, there's no better way to do that than to serve. And the park is a great place to do that.
Can I add to that? I believe that with everything that's in me. I'm the most unqualified person to be there and to be doing what I'm doing. Like I said, I was in a bubble, and I'm even weird for Christians.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, I just wasn't, I didn't do a lot of things. I've never been homeless. I've never been addicted. I don't think I've ever even been drunk. I've not experienced the things that they experience. And I find that when I'm at the park, it's probably the first place I've ever been that I can be exactly who I am. And it's the right place. It's the right thing to do.
Yes.
It's the right person to be. And so, if there's, whether you feel like you're qualified, unqualified, or whatever, I am the most unqualified, and I have found the greatest acceptance. I have found the greatest love. So many things I've gained from it. And it's just, so, do not let those things hinder anyone from coming. And we have a lot of volunteers that have experienced those things. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just come.
Just come.
Yeah.
And even if you're in a place like we were describing where you want to see miracles happen, is places like the park. It happens every day, and you will be blessed to be a part of it. So visit the PARC, PARC.net for more information. I'm sure their hours are listed there, and then make your way down there and check out what's going on. Thank you, Valerie, for what you do for our community and for your friendship. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for asking.
All
I
right.
appreciate it.
I'm glad you got to meet Valerie. I hope you'll check out the park. We'll see you next time.